Have you lost a lot of weight in a really short period of time? It might be doing you more harm than good. If that's you, then this video is for you. So today's video discusses the important subject of calorie restriction and how periods of severe calorie restriction can have negative health and metabolic effects over the long term. So let's start by listing a few examples of the negative health outcomes from extreme forms of dieting. The first example is adaptive thermogenesis, which is a decrease in energy expenditure or basically a lowering of your resting metabolic rate. The second is hyperphagia, and this is more commonly known as excessive hunger, when the body desires more than it requires. And thirdly, an increased risk of future body fat regain, particularly in individuals who are already lean. Now, this phenomenon has been described in the research as body fat overshooting, and this is the biological drive to restore body weight following periods of extended or extreme weight loss. The mechanism behind this theory is that in response to rapid reductions in fat mass and fat-free mass, key regulatory hormone levels fall, which then sends feedback signals to the brain, leading to increased hunger levels, as well as changes in adaptive thermogenesis. These changes often lead to rapid weight regain due to increased food intake and reduced activity levels and thus energy expenditure. We also know that periods of severe calorie restriction can suppress muscle protein synthesis and increase muscle protein breakdown. This observation is frequently referred to in the scientific literature as anabolic resistance. Previous research has demonstrated that this occurs through a disruption to one of the processes of the endocrine system, and this is called the GH-IGF-1 axis, or it's also termed growth hormone resistance. This is when growth hormone secretion is no longer stimulating IGF-1 production, and therefore muscle growth is potentially minimized. These changes occur in a rather dose-dependent fashion, where higher levels of calorie restriction produce more exaggerated disruptions in growth hormone and insulin-like growth factor, when compared to lower levels of calorie restriction or simply being in a state of energy balance. So with a little background out of the way, I now want to focus on the aspects of increased muscle protein breakdown and the concept of body fat overshooting. Now, this first 2015 study by Carl and colleagues titled Altered Metabolic Homeostasis is associated with appetite regulation during and following 48 hours of severe energy restriction in adults. Now, this study included 23 male and female soldiers who participated in a double-blind randomized control trial. It had two distinct experimental conditions. Condition 1 was the energy balance condition, and the other condition was the energy deprivation condition. In the energy balance condition, the soldiers were provided diets designed to maintain their body weight. The daily calorie intake provided to the subjects was equal to each person's estimated total energy expenditure, or their TDEE. This is the sum of how many calories you burn at rest, or known as your RMR, plus the number of calories that you burn when you're going about your normal daily activities. In the energy deprivation condition, the diet provided was designed to produce a severe calorie deficit. To meet the total daily energy expenditure prescription, each volunteer performed supervised activity at around 40 to 65% of their VO2 peak for several hours every day. These modalities included cardio machines such as the elliptical and the treadmill, and it also included activities such as walking and running, as well as the stationary bike. In both groups, energy balance or energy deprivation, the diets had the same volume of food but were built around their custom food lists. In the energy deprivation group, meals and snacks were devoid of energy but had the same taste, same texture and appearance as the energy balance group. Now, the subjects' resting metabolic rates, VO2 peak, subjective appetite ratings, which is basically how hungry they were, along with blood samples were all taken, and these measured things like their hormones insulin, cortisol, and the sex hormone DHEAS. After both experimental periods, the subjects could eat as much as they wanted for a period of around 36 hours, and then they completed a food record. Each condition lasted for 2 days, and this was followed by a 10-day washout period. Now, the results found that greater energy intake was consumed following the energy deprivation condition relative to the energy balance condition. Now, what's interesting about this is this was the result even when food volume was being maintained in that 10-day post-experimental period. After the experimental period, the participants' ad libitum energy intake was around 907 calories higher over that 36-hour window following the energy deprivation condition compared to the energy balance. Now, this is also extremely important to mention because the higher calories consumed following the energy restriction condition is very similar to one's biological drive to restore body fat after periods of weight loss. The results also show that serum levels of glucose, insulin, and leptin concentrations all decreased in the energy deprivation group and were lower at all time points, when compared to the energy balance group, and that's with a significant p-value of 0.001 across all measures. Cortisol levels and DHEAS were also found to increase in the energy deprivation condition and were higher compared to the energy balance group. Whole body protein balance was also more negative with a p-value of 0.001, and this means that more protein breakdown was occurring during the energy deprivation condition compared to the energy balance group. Now you can see here on this scatter plot that it shows a 36-hour period of ad libitum energy intakes following the energy deficit and the energy balance condition, and then their net protein balance. There was a statistically significant difference for the protein breakdown between the two groups. The group in the severe energy deficit had more protein breakdown. In fact, this was around 7.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, compared to the energy balance group, whose protein breakdown was 4 grams of protein per kilogram body weight per day, again with another p-value of less than 0.005. There were also statistically significant differences for whole body protein balance. The group in the severe energy deficit lost more whole body protein, and this is around 0.7 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, compared to the energy balance group, who lost only 0.1 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. Now, this is really important because it shows us that there is an increase in muscle protein breakdown during periods of severe energy restriction. And guys, this is the last thing that we want when we've worked so hard to build that muscle. Now, this last graph shows the participants' appetite ratings using the satiety-labeled intensity magnitude scale. Now, these two were significantly lower at every time point in the energy deprivation group compared to the energy balance group, except for just one day of the study. And this indicates that the energy deprivation group, surprise, surprise, had significantly increased appetites during that deficit period. So what are my main takeaways from this paper? Well, we can conclude from this study and many others just like this that there are a number of disadvantages to severely restricting your energy intake, and these include lower levels of whole body protein, and this can lead to losses in lean muscle mass, also increases in appetite and increased caloric intake once that diet period ends, and unfortunately that can lead to excess body fat regain. Now, it is understandable why so many of us, particularly those who are less educated in the area of nutrition, would believe that it is necessary to undertake extreme forms of dietary restriction in efforts to lose weight. However, we can see here it is simply not the case. Many people really struggle to accept this information and will continue to severely restrict their calories in order to lose fat. For some, this might look like cycles of undereating followed by periods of overeating, or exercise compensation and the cycle of food restriction continues. And this can have many negative physical and psychological consequences, and it's just simply not sustainable, nor is it healthy. Now, if fat loss is important to you, whether it's for health reasons or otherwise, you can still choose to partake in these cutting phases, but you should aim to take it slow, with no more than 1 to 1.5% of your body weight lost per week. This is not to say that if you choose to diet that it will always lead to negative consequences. However, it is important to be aware of some of the implications it may have on your metabolism, especially if you decrease your calories too quickly. Now guys, if you still have questions regarding weight loss, please reach out to me or my team for the opportunity to work with us one-on-one. Now, the links are listed in my bio if you're watching this on Instagram, and if you're following me on YouTube, you can find those details in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.